The reduction will probably be small, if any. We have to do a full economic analysis on it. And of course, like you're talking about the labour that you're saving as well, there's also the electricity saving because you're not turning on the parlour for that second time 4 days during the week. You're saving water. There's lots of kind of, hidden savings that are there as well that will all contribute into it.
One of the major challenges that dairy farmers have is the need to milk cows every day of the week. In the absence of skilled people to fill the gap, this poses a challenge in terms of getting time off, especially in owner-operator setups. Milking frequency is being looked at in Teagasc Moorepark, with a lot of work done on once a day in the past, and more recently looking at reduced milking frequencies such as 10 and 7 and 12 and 7. Today I'm joined by Emer Kennedy and Kieran McCarthy, who are looking at this work at the moment. I started by asking Emer, how has the reduced milking frequency work impacted on milk production, as this is the main question that people ask when this topic is discussed.
Anytime you reduce your milking frequency, you're going to reduce the amount of milk that the cows are producing. So that's something that you have to bear in mind. So what we talk about are maybe strategies. They mightn't be for everybody, but it's just a bit of food for thought for people that it might be something that you can work into your system. I guess we have looked at the whole range of different milking frequencies. So we've looked at early lactation once a day, late lactation once a day, looked at full time once a day for the whole lactation. And now we're looking at the reduced milking frequency in terms of the 10 and 7, which is 10 milkings in a week, or the 12 and 7, which is 12 milkings per week. So just to give you an idea, the 10 and 7, so the milking strategy we would use there is milking twice a day on a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday, and then once a day on a Tuesday, a Thursday, a Saturday and a Sunday. So because you're dropping those 4 milkings, you can expect a little bit of a milk reduction.
Okay, and then on the 12 and 7, what milkings are you dropping out those days, or in that week, sorry?
So for the 12 and 7, it's dropping the weekend milking. So milking twice a day, Monday to Friday, and then once a day on a Saturday and a Sunday.
Okay, and I suppose from the point of view of timing, what time are you actually milking at then, in that scenario?
So how we work out milking time is we take cups on time on a twice a day. So say for example on a Monday we take cups on time in the afternoon milking, and then the next twice a day, which will be the Wednesday, cups on time in the morning on that day, and then we would go halfway between the two. So for us, we're probably milking at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday and 7 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. So that would mean that we would have a milking time of 10 o'clock in the morning on the Tuesday morning, the once a day. But to be honest, the cows come in last into the parlour, so they're probably milked about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we're not seeing that much of a difference in the milk yield with changing the time back.
Okay, so from a practicality point of view, obviously, rather than shutting down the parlour when all the rest of the herd are going through in Moorepark, obviously, because there's loads of other cows being milked as well as these cows, it's just as easy, just let them in last and they get milked at that stage.
Exactly. So we're probably taking an hour or so off it, but there isn't that much of a difference in it.
Okay, and you've done this. You've done a couple of examples of this, I suppose, or a couple of iterations of it, I suppose, Emer, in that you're doing it full time, or you've switched to it, we'll say midway through the season as well. So just give us an idea of the milk volume loss that you're talking about there, because obviously, as I said, people are concerned about that, but how significant is it?
So I guess like the experiment that we've been running in terms of the 10 and 7, if for the last number of years, is we've had a full-time 10 and 7 herd. So those cows have been milked 10 times per week for the full lactation. We've then had another herd or another treatment where we've milked them 10 and 7 for the second half lactation. So that means they were milked twice a day for the first half, for the first 20 weeks, and switching over then around the start of July when they're halfway through their lactation, and then back to the 10 and 7 for remainder of lactation. So when we've milked them 10 times per week for the full lactation, we've had a reduction of about 12% in milk yield, or just under 700 kilos of milk. And for the part-time 10 and 7s, it's been about 2%, so about 117 kilos of milk. Now, if we were to compare that to the full-time once a day milking, with full-time once a day milking, your reduction in milk yield is about 26%. So that full-time 10 and 7 is kind of coming halfway between twice a day milking and full-time once a day.
So, Emer, I suppose you're talking about it in volume terms there. What about it in milk solids? Because we would have seen with the once a day work in the past that while the volume drop was X, maybe the solids drop wasn't as significant because obviously solids concentration would increase. Is that the same on these trials?
Yeah, so we would see an increase in the solids, as in the fat and protein, but overall milk solids yield would be reduced by about 12, 13% with the full-time 10 and 7. When we look at the part-time 10 and 7s, there's very little difference between the tw cow's milk twice a day for the full lactation and cow's milk 10 and 7 for half the lactation.
And do you see a notable increase in the concentration of solids in that latter half of the season to say that there isn't an effect? We'll say, is there a concentration of fat and protein in that milk in the latter half of the season to say you're not getting any impact or very little impact?
Yeah, so just to give you an idea that for in terms of milk fat, the twice day cows were producing their fat was 5.46% for the second half lactation, whereas for the part-time 10 and 7s it was 5.63%. In terms of protein, then the twice a days, their protein for the second half lactation was 4.05%, and the part-time 10 and 7s at the 10 and 7 for the second half lactation, that was 4.14%. So there is a difference there. The volume of milk though is dropping.
So from a cost point of view, Emer, I know you haven't looked at it now, but like it actually you mightn't be talking about much of a difference in cost there because you have a better price litre for the litres that are going in on the reduced milking frequency from mid-season on. So you'd actually be getting paid for a better for more, getting paid more for the litre that you're selling than the twice a day litre. So the actual cost of it, even though there's people will see that there's a reduction, it mightn't actually come to anything in the financial terms.
Yeah, the reduction will probably be small, if any. We have to do a full economic analysis on it, and of course, like you're talking about the labour that you're saving as well. There's also the electricity saving because you're not turning on the parlour for that second time, 4 days during the week. You're saving water. There's lots of kind of hidden savings that are there as well that will all contribute into it.
Okay, and actually, just know that you mentioned it as well, because I didn't ask you earlier, the impact in terms of that peak in the 10 and 7 group and the 12 and 7 group as well, is it difficult for the cows, we'll say, are they really full of milk when they come to the next milking after the skipped milking as such?
Yeah, so like we've looked at the data, and again with our full-time once-a-day cows, where we've looked at their locomotion score to make sure that having those big full udders isn't impacting their locomotion, looking at the udder firmness, milk leakage. So like there's no difference in udder firmness, like all the cows have really firm udders when they're at peak lactation. The once a day cows milked once a day or reduced milking frequency tend to have a little bit more milk leakage than the twice a day cows. And again, there's no difference in locomotion score between any of them, so it's not negatively impacting on their welfare.
Okay, so that's the milk production piece of it. The cell count piece is the other thing that bothers people around changing milking frequency, and I suppose we see it there as you spoke about switching, doing trial work on the once a day and late lactation in the past, and you do get a spike in cell count when you do that. Does that happen as well? Like obviously the full year reduced milking frequency groups, you don't you probably don't get the same impact because they go straight into that process and they kind of settle into it very quickly. But when from July on, when you switch to the 10 and 7 or the 12 and 7, does that impact cell count?
Cell count is increased a little bit. I'd say like if we talk about the part-time 10 and 7, so from July onwards, there is an increase in cell count, but like the twice a days are also increasing. So the twice a day, their cell count increased by about 5%. The part-times and the full-times, their cell count increased by about 10%. But if we look at the week of changeover, when we went from twice a day milking to 10 and 7, there was no big spike in cell count during those weeks. It's probably just down to a dilution effect with the 10 and 7 volume reducing. If we look at the number of mastitis cases, there was no difference in the number of clinical cases of mastitis across any of the herds.
Okay, but I suppose it's probably important to point out to people that there's very high level of management in terms of managing mastitis in the first place. So those cows aren't running at a high cell count in the first place.
Yeah, no, cell count is very well managed on the farm. And like I think anytime you look at reducing milking frequency in terms of full-time once a day or part-time once a day, you need to be technically very good in terms of your grass management, your cow management. So, on the days that you're only seeing the cows once in the parlour, you need to be like, be very vigilant, I guess, maybe be checking for mastitis in the cows just so that you're on it.
So, Kieran, I suppose Emer's teed you up there from a practical point of view. How does implementing the milking frequency or reduced milking frequency operation impact at a farm level? So, like, how do the cows adjust with themselves? How do the lads and yourselves that are working with them adjust to it? Is it straightforward, or is there a bit of a kind of a transition period where they need to settle into the change?
We kind of find it very straightforward here, Stuart. I suppose, look, on the single days, we keep the 10-7s on their own. And on the twice a days, then we kind of milk or we keep all the groups together. So we kind of go 24-hour blocks. So before cows go into paddock, we take the cuts just to determine what covers in the paddock. And we were able to allocate a 24-hour break for each group. So on a double day, all three groups are together. So twice a days, the part times and the full time 10-7s, they're all together in one group. So it just kind of makes it easier for the drovers when on a twice a day they know the cow's being milked as all as one group. So then on a single day, then we keep 10-7s midweek together. And on the weekends, we keep the 12-7s and the 10-7s together. So the lads know exactly kind of what days they're milked twice a days and milked as once a day group.
Okay, and I suppose if we were to roll it forward in terms of this happening on a commercial farm level, then Kieran, how do you think it works in terms of the feed allocations and so forth? Like, because obviously you've a whole lot of other cows to milk as well on the farm. So actually, in reality, in Moorpark, we don't get the benefit of the 10-7 or the 12-7 really, but because there's still cows to be milked. But if a farmer was going doing this, would you just advocate that they would just give the full allocation then rather than going back and giving extra allocation? And the other question I suppose that I would have as well is in relation to meal feeding. Obviously, you're under pressure there at the moment for grass on the farm currently. Like, what are you doing in terms of the feed allocation when it comes to concentrate or silage in a scenario such as this with the reduced frequency group?
I suppose there we kind of keep it simple here at Moorpark. So cows, the max they were getting concentrates about 4 kilos. So we kind of give it all to them and say if they're on 2 kilos, 1 kilo, or 3 kilos, we give it to them in the morning milking because we just see there we might forget about it there in the evening milking if cows are milked once a day. So we just kind of keep things simple. We give it all to them in one allocation in the morning, and we don't see any difference between the cows. They don't get sick from it or anything like that. In terms of silage, we probably only fed silage for one full week here this year. So we did our grass cover on the Monday, and we just seen our cover per livestock unit was very low. And even with the increase in ration from 2 kilos to 4 kilos, we just had supplement silage in. So we were giving them 4 kilos of ration, probably 6 kilos silage, and 7 and 8 kilos of grass in. So they were in by day on silage and out by night in grass. So that's the way we kind of worked it here in Moorpark.
Okay, and just from the milking times, then we'll say, obviously, as Emer has said there, you're not adjusting the time significantly. Is it straightforward enough so basically to implement it in that when you do the switch over, I suppose more so than the full year changes, it's just it almost falls into place that you just stop milking in the evening.
Yeah, we find it very handy here. No, in fairness, Stuart, like even when we changed over last year, it took cows probably a week to adjust it. But once cows kind of figured out what days they're only being milked once a day, there was no fear of cows weren't even coming to the gap or nothing. We see there last year with the first week when we changed over, cows seemed to be starting to bunch at the paddock. But when cows realised they weren't being milked on them single days, they were just all scattered around the field the following week. So cows kind of adjusted very fairly quick enough.
And I think maybe one of the things people can do is maybe give fresh grass in the afternoon if they were
Yeah,
worried for the first week or so. And once they have a fresh bite of grass, they're pretty content.
yeah.
So from that point of view, then, Kieran, there obviously is a bit of an unsettled period with them, and as Emer has said there, you could maybe get around that by doing the fresh allocation, but you didn't do that. Obviously, they obviously settled back in then. So Kieran, I suppose from the point of view of the cows being a little bit unsettled, then did it take them long to settle down, or was it more than the one day, or what did you? Will say, as Emer said there about allocating fresh grass, you didn't do that, so they were obviously gathered at the gap. Did it take them long to kind of get cop on that they weren't going to be getting milked and to go away again?
So when we kind of changed over last year, we just saw for the first single milking, cows were kind of gathered at the gap. But once they were milked twice the second day and the third day, then when they went back to their single milking, cows seemed to be scattered around the field. They kind of knew that they weren't being brought in. So we kind of had a full-time 10-7 group, which were all scattered around the field. And cows just seem to adjust fairly quick enough to that. So we kind of grazed part of the 10-7 that changed over and the full time 10-7 together. So once cows kind of seen that they weren't being milked twice a day, there was no fear. So they adjusted, I'd say, within 3 or 4 days.
I think it's worth remembering that the cows are extremely flexible. Like if you look at on-off grazing, initially you would have said they're never going to get used to coming in and out at different times during the day. And again, they adapt to that. Or if you're buffer feeding silage, they'll wait at the gap to come in, but once they know it's not going to come, they go again. So like the cows will adapt to anything. It's often us who has the mental block and not the cows.
And then we'll say just advice maybe if people wanted to switch to it this year, what should they do at this stage? Or maybe people that are thinking of doing it next year, should they transition to it now at this stage of the year when it is easy to do or easier to do maybe rather than trying to do it now? You're shaking your head.
No, because yields will be gone a little bit low at this stage.
Okay.
We changed them in July when they have decent yield so that the reduction won't be too bad.
Yeah.
Whereas our once a day work now would show, like, say, you're kind of getting into late lactation territory now where the yields are dropping off pretty fast.
Okay. So I suppose, Emer, what are the plans in terms of further research in the milking frequency over the next number of years? What challenges are you going to give Kieran?
So at the moment we're looking at 12 and 7, and this is our first year doing the 12 and 7. So we'll wait and see what the
Yeah.
results look like from that. Initial results would say, there's not too much difference, but again, we'll have to wait till the end of the year to do a full analysis on the data there, and see what's coming up, and we'll take it from there then.
Okay, so overall summation of it from me both then is positive. I would take it that there is that. Obviously, as I said, Kieran, you're not getting the benefit of the eliminating the work because you obviously have the other groups still to milk. But I suppose it shortens the those evenings when you don't have those groups coming in.
Yeah, look, we find out at 10-7, just especially milking time. So it like tis 22 cows less in the evening, and on the weekends then tis 44 cows less in the evening. So I'll probably reduce milking within, I'd say, 20 minutes. So the lads find a fair Sandy here in the parlour. So they've 44 cows less there in the weekend. It speeds up milking a lot. So it could knock 20 minutes off milking by the time they be finished in the evening.
Yeah, okay. And obviously, so just so that people are clear, like you're saying that because obviously there's other herds been milked here for that are involved in research work, but that milking is effectively eliminated on farm in a normal on farm situation. So it is something that people are looking at, Emer. I'm sure you actually had a bit of interest in it there during the course of the summer. A couple of groups from Midlands and so forth were interested in talking about it. And it's something that as I said at the outset, it's getting tricky to get people to milk, especially at weekends. So the 12 and 7 results when they come out will be very interesting. Now, obviously, you'll only have 1 year's data, and it has been a tricky year, I suppose, as a whole for feeding cows. So it won't tell the full story, but you're going to repeat that obviously over the next couple of years. Then, so generally speaking, you're probably talking about doing 3 years of all of these studies to get kind of robust data behind them, aren't you?
Yeah, like generally we repeat studies. I guess, what we'd be looking for is the relative difference between the twice a days and the 12 and 7 because the year was the same for all the herds of cows. So we will get a pretty good indication of what's happening. But yeah, I think, there's lots of options that are there for farmers. It's they can be as flexible as they like with the milking times. The other option that's there is 13 times a week. So, you could dabble with that, maybe dropping the Sunday evening milking if you wanted. Again, there's no difference, very little difference, but when you do that, and it might just give you a taster for it.
And again, just in the timing of that 13 times a week, is it split the difference again, like you said at the start there, just try to milk that little bit later, maybe on the Sunday morning and skip the Sunday evening then?
Yeah, yeah, you can do that. Like I say, at the moment, the cows are not at peak production, so it's not as big an issue, making sure that the milkings are balanced. But yeah, ideally, if you could milk a little bit later on the Sunday morning, not too much, like maybe an hour or so, and then back to your normal time again on the Monday.
It's popular, relatively popular in New Zealand, Emer, is it?
It is like if you look at the data coming from New Zealand, less than half the farmers are actually milking twice a day for the full year round. They're doing some sort of variation, like there's a few milk, about 10% milking, once a day on a full-time basis, and the rest are doing 3 and 2 or some sort of combination of flexible milking.
Okay, so Kieran, would you see it? Can you see it taking off, we'll say?
I suppose once their cell count is right, the big thing is cell count. If they have the right cell count, I don't see any issue with farmers doing it around Ireland.
There's no reason to not do it, basically, Kieran. Once you're on top of the cell count game and the switch over is going to be straightforward,
Yeah.
there's no issue.
And I guess, and once you accept that there probably will be a little bit of a reduction in milk yield.
Yeah, but again, I suppose the economic analysis when you do that, Emer, will be the interesting piece. But as I said there, I think that increase in solids is going to give you that better value litre. So I'd say it won't be as much as people might be afraid it might be like. So, look, I suppose we look forward to seeing the results of the 12 and 7 for the, albeit preliminary at the end of the year. Maybe we might pick up on it again next year at some stage. Thanks for coming on and giving us the information in terms of the figures, Emer, and Kieran, from a practical point of view. We really appreciate that it's important that people get it's easy for Emer to sit in her ivory tower there and tell us how good it is to happen or how easy it is to do. It's a different story, maybe implementing it on the ground. I'm being harsh on you there, Emer. I know you often have the overalls and the Wellingtons on as well. So thanks very much for joining me today, lads.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Emer Kennedy and Kieran McCarthy for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.